Welcome to another Current Thinking broadcast from Eaton, a series dedicated to sharing expert insights on intelligent power trends and innovative ideas impacting the electrical industry. My name is Justin Carron, the Global Healthcare Segment Manager here at Eaton. And today we are going to address a topic that's been on everyone's mind, which is how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated innovation in the healthcare industry. Our panel of experts that are assembled today come from across the industry and have considerable knowledge and experience on this exact topic. I'd like to ask our panelists to please introduce themselves, beginning with David Sylvan.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Eaton. Thank you to Michael Regelski for including university hospitals in this conversation. I'm David Sylvan. I'm president of UH Ventures. We are the innovation and commercialization platform for the system. Our task, our mandate is to source alternate sustainable revenue streams for the healthcare system. And we can source these either from within our own domain, from our clinicians, our researchers, our administrative partners, as well as from the outside in the form of strategic partnerships. And these could range from large corporate entities, for example, our partnership with Eaton, as well as to include startup companies, early stage companies that we source from domestic and international supplies with regard to our venturing efforts, how we would look to pilot, how we would look to invest, and how we would look to enter into co-development type arrangements. Part of our responsibility is also for the programming that would drive the culture within our organization, specifically the culture of so-called intrapreneurship. And we do so in order to induce, to encourage, to enable the sourcing and supply of continually commercially viable innovations for well-defined unmet needs. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. My name is Allan Ames. I'm the president of BR+A Consultant Engineers. We are a global engineering company with 9 offices across the United States, working primarily in the healthcare and life sciences market sectors in the United States. Thank you to Eaton for including us on the panel here. And again, we specialize in healthcare, then that includes proton therapy and large scale replacement facilities.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Michael Regelski, and I am Senior Vice President of Research and Development for Intelligent Power Management Solutions, and also Chief Technology Officer for Eaton's electrical sector. So in my responsibilities, we've always been focused on safe, efficient, reliable transmission and delivery, distribution of electrical power. And what we're really looking at now is how do we create that next generation of intelligent power management solutions by taking new digital technologies and helping to apply them and lead the world through the ongoing energy transition.
Well, welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking part in this very important conversation today. As you might expect, we have a lot of ground to cover. So I'd like to start us off by looking back several months ago to the early March timeframe. And Allan, what do you think some of the major infrastructure and facility challenges healthcare organizations faced at that initial outset of the COVID-19 pandemic? And how did they respond to those challenges?
Initially, it was actually back in the Boston area in the beginning of March, there was an understanding that there was going to be a surge of patients potentially coming in. So every institution started taking a look at it and trying to figure out what they needed to do to handle that surge. That included setting up temporary emergency departments to handle the large influx of patients, setting up temporary morgues, which are basically refrigerated tractor trailer trucks with standby power, so that they could handle the additional bodies that were coming out of the facilities. We worked on the Boston Hope facility, which is the convention center, where they took the convention center when it was initially constructed. It had power and water and drains all built into the floors. So they were able to build a 1,000-bed facility to handle the influx of additional COVID patients. And then, the testing facilities, there were lots and lots and lots of testing facilities that were brought on board. And all of these facilities had to have utilities available pretty quickly, and they were set up very quickly. Another thing that the facilities did, every healthcare facility did, was looked at their existing infrastructure and the ability to handle additional patients, looking at med surg rooms, figuring out if they could convert those to negative pressure rooms to contain the virus, seeing if they were ICU adaptable, and making sure that they could hook up ventilators and whatever equipment they needed to service the patients who were extremely sick. So there was a pretty wide range of response on everything from getting generators delivered and temporary electrical services set up to working with the facilities engineering teams at the different healthcare facilities to make sure that their facilities were set up appropriately for the patients that were coming in.
Great. And David, I'm curious to learn from a UH perspective, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, Justin, so Allan sort of alluded to some of this. None of us had a sense for the magnitude or the duration of the pandemic. And so without any historic roadmap to benchmark off of, we really had to prepare for, as Allan alludes, a worst case scenario. And this cut across all facets of our business: physical plant, people deployment, equipment needs, burn rates, and specifically for all of us. And I think we watched this all unfold on the news every evening, the growing fear and reality that our supply chain mechanism would not be able to source and service our PPE needs for our patients and front lines. So as for facility challenges, UH actually found itself in a relatively fortunate position. The irony of having our primary facility, where we're 18 hospitals, about 500 outpatient facilities, but the irony of having a primary facility anchored in a historic building meant that we could take advantage of the fact that we featured a very large and unused TB ward, which was already tooled for negative air. And along with that, we had a number of spaces that were ICU adaptable, and those were preemptively reconfigured. So our challenges weren't acutely physical plant, but our opportunity was how to harness, how to mine, how to react as a result of the copious volumes of data being generated out of the system in order to inform our centralized incident command structure, which we literally stood up in a matter of hours. And so in other words, how to mobilize these data sets for downstream analytics. These would include near real-time data marts for COVID testing results, ED patient flow, ventilator usage, EMS data from the community, dispatch data. And what was critical is we did this in conjunction with our partner hospital systems in the same geographic region. And this all formed the basis of our intelligence briefings, and also established a framework for so-called syndromic surveillance, which enables resource allocation, deployment, and deployment informed by geospatial analytics. I could go on, but I think you get the point in terms of centralized pattern recognition, modeling, etc.
Yeah, very interesting perspective, David. So Michael, what did you see on the Eaton side when you had to help customers?
It's interesting. I think we became really hyper-focused on two aspects of power, and that's reliability and resiliency, because those are really the keys to making healthcare workers in hospitals and medical organizations function during the early stages of the pandemic. When you think about the healthcare workers trying to deal with just the normal day-to-day operations and stuff that are going on, and now you have this influx of new patients, new criticalities that they have to deal with. The last thing that we wanted them to worry about was, is the power going to go on? We had to make sure that the lights were kept on, they were operational, and that infrastructure, all the medical equipment, was up and going. So making sure that efficient power studies were done, that we had sufficient supply of backup parts in case there were failures, and making sure that could feed into our supply chain and then into the hospital systems to our distributors was extremely important. David touched upon an aspect that I think often goes missed in this, And that's the critical reliance that hospitals have on information systems and the back, um, data center, if you will, behind the hospital. Being able to understand and monitor all the information that's coming in and keeping that part of the infrastructure going was absolutely critical. And then we think about the new facilities that are being built. I mean, this is being done in kind of record time. So making sure that we had our manufacturing in place while businesses were in different regions were being impacted, making sure that we can get critical parts into the supply chain, being able to distribute it so that companies like Allan can go and build the appropriate infrastructure to help the hospitals. That was really how we became ultra focused to help and make sure that the communities at large could withstand this epidemic.
Thank you, Michael. I'm curious to learn how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the decision-making for technology needs and upgrades. And Allan, if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with you again. What were some of the major technology considerations that became a top priority due to the pandemic response?
So when the pandemic hit, everybody naturally is concerned about the surge and staying online. So everybody was looking at, what do they need to do to keep their temporary emergency departments, temporary facilities going. So a lot of that was, where do we get the standby power to take care of that, bringing in generators and backup power for that. They were also looking at different ways of handling the surge. So taking the patients out of the mainstream of the emergency departments and putting them in temporary facilities that needed heating, cooling, power 24/7, and being able to handle the surge of those patients coming in. And then, on the testing side, it was an important component to make sure that they had the whole thing geared up so that when you get, hundreds of thousands of people coming in on a daily basis to get tested, that they had all their facilities. So, whether it's basically making it a full-blown hospital in a tent outside of a building or a healthcare facility. So there was a lot of where do we get this power? How do we get it set up? How do we set up the temporary panels for it? Kind of a all hands on deck approach of getting that set up. And then, like I said, in the actual, once they become a patient, is making them making the rooms set up so that they can have all the monitoring equipment and ventilators and everything in there, which is basically an ICU adaptable type space.
And David, so I'm curious, David, you mentioned that from a physical plant perspective, you were okay. So I'm curious from an IT perspective, how did you make those priorities within your IT basket of solutions?
Sure, and I don't know who said it. The notion of never letting a crisis go to waste. We'll never fully revert back to the manner and the modality of care delivery circa February of this year. And probably the most notable would be the genie out of the virtual patient visit bottle. We literally went from hundreds of remote appointments in February to, I think we're now approaching 300,000 remote visits since then. And I don't know that we'll see a material drop off once this all passes. So what does this mean from maybe a technology strategy, IT and strategy investment perspective? I think first you have to consider or reconsider as a healthcare system your real estates and bricks and mortar strategy roadmap, whether that should be retained or jettisoned. And then how do you backfill using technology and your IT partners to hopefully optimize care delivery moving forward through digital enablement? And, as an example, Justin, UH was the first system nationally to use remote monitoring technology through a strategic partnership with two other entities to send COVID positive patients home, those experiencing mild symptoms, instead of keeping them hospitalized, and therefore the knock-on effect of straining clinical resources that might be then deprived to those with acute needs. And in this particular case, we sent these patients home with a combination of a digital tetherless pulse ox device. This was paired with a mobile patient surveillance platform, And it served a dual purpose. Not only did we allow certain COVID patients to heal at home, which is a powerful mantra for our system, but we could simultaneously monitor comorbidities, congestive heart failure, COPD, all from home. And none of this could have been achieved without a critical alignment with our IT infrastructure. We've had situations where the technology prompted clinical intervention, and this avoided an ER visit or worse outcomes. So we know it works. So that's an example of an investment in conjunction with our IT mechanism, in this case, remote monitoring and telehealth. There are certainly others involving AI and decision support and RPA for back office efficiencies, et cetera. And perhaps we'll get into some of those later.
And Michael, from an Eaton perspective, I'm assuming that it had to just be overwhelming for a lot of your customers. So I'm curious, how did Eaton help guide their customers on what priorities, what decisions to make during the pandemic?
Well, it's easy. It's interesting, Justin. This is where we found that our investments that we've made in cloud computing, connectivity, and analytics really helped to guide us and work with our customers. And it happened in a few different areas that I'll point out. One is the ability to work with our factories and make sure that there was a lot of the testing that was done and information from the customer parameters that were needed for equipment, that got done and tested in the factory. It then led to ease of deployment and making sure that the right information and equipment got out through our supply chain. And then when we had to go and build new facilities or build new power infrastructure, the ability to do the remote commissioning really paid off. I mean, we literally cut months and weeks out of what a typical process would be to help respond to the pandemic, especially during these stages of rapid deployment. And then when we think about it on the how do you keep things running and making sure that you're going to have this safe, reliable power. Now that we have the connectivity, we can remotely monitor all of the infrastructure and how it's working. That is the power working reliably? Is there about to be a failure? Using data analytics to monitor that, we can get ahead of the curve and make sure that if there was going to be a component that would fail or there looked like there could be an anomaly, get equipment, get components, get stuff into the customer's hands well ahead of time and everything. And then there's two other aspects that we found really critical in working with our customers. One was that we were able to start using augmented reality to be able to go and transmit information from people that were already on site back to experts that were in the back office so that we could understand what's happening with equipment, because we couldn't go and readily deploy people like you would in normal operating situations. And then probably maybe the thing that I just want to highlight here that we put a tremendous emphasis on during this time that doesn't hit the headlines, but it would if there was an incident, is the relentless approach to cybersecurity. With all of the new technology coming in, and you have all of the potential field equipment being deployed and monitored and connected, if you can imagine in the midst of a crisis, now there's some kind of cybersecurity attack that could cripple the power infrastructure. We wanted to make sure that we were ahead of the game on that and really putting an emphasis on this, because that's the last thing anyone would need in these times.
I can second what Michael was just talking about, is that we've seen a lot of the facilities engineering groups at the healthcare providers working remotely. And obviously they're basically on call 24/7. They have operations staff on campus, but from the engineering side of things, they're doing things a lot more remotely now. So they're able to pull up the power systems, the building automation systems, and troubleshoot and see what's going on, troubleshoot them, have their facility staff go out and do a video over the internet. The facilities these days, the cost per square foot of a new healthcare facility is approaching $1,000 a square foot, of which the low voltage technology side of things is north of $20 a square foot. So you're looking at huge, robust systems that are used across the board, and the security of them is tantamount on the whole thing, because we've seen a lot of different facilities under attack, and we're not sure where it's coming from, but like that security and the ability for people to work remotely and see what's going on is a major component. Also working in the cloud and being able to access facilities drawings and records and shop drawings and things like that is become a larger and larger component of the healthcare facilities. So you're absolutely right on point there.
Thanks, Allan. I wanted to spend some time now talking about innovation by necessity. And I know this is a topic near and dear to both your hearts, David and Michael. And I think a great example of this theme is around worker and patient safety. It was a huge challenge at the outset of the pandemic, and it's a huge challenge today. And David, I'm curious, what were some of the biggest safety issues and challenges hospitals face while addressing these patient safety needs?
Yeah, Justin, well, no surprise to anyone, but at the time, the looming PPE shortage, and we're talking about all SKUs, masks, shields, gloves, gowns, swabs, and even items like intubation boxes or isolation pods. We also had the risk of not having sufficient capital equipment items, ventilators, etc. And we watched with horror what was unfolding in Italy and New York at the time, and we were motivated to preempt and react as rapidly as we could. But from an on-the-ground perspective, the safety concerns for us were both proximity and contact risk. How can we create a line of defense, a barrier, whether that be physical or digital, that hopefully insulates both the patient and the provider from each other without materially impeding the delivery of care, and without impeding the humanity that we all take for granted when it comes to the patient-provider encounter. I say physical or digital because we look to find solutions for both. And we partnered with you, for example, to rapidly design, fabricate, gather user insights, and pivot the sourcing of face shields, a physical barrier. In addition, there were Perspex testing booths. These allowed clinicians and patients to interact throughout a procedure when it comes whilst preserving critical PPE, if you will. And let me express, and I've expressed this before to Michael, but it deserves to be called out again. Eaton was the first large corporate to pick up the phone in early March and ask, how might we help? And it wasn't qualified. It wasn't how might we help and we'll work out the economics, or how might we help and let's get some PR ready, and not let's make sure there's attribution, but unequivocally, what can we do to help, period. And it was this egoless generosity that spawned a series of parallel work streams with tremendous success, and these continue to this day. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Eaton and Michael specifically.
David, thank you for that. I just want to add on. I mean, when we reached out and said, how can we help? That really is a corporate philosophy that we have. It's driven from Craig Arnold, our CEO, on down through his leadership team, that we need as corporate citizens to be active in the communities that we live in. And that is a philosophy that it really is very endearing and part of our culture at Eaton. And we didn't know how we can help. And I think to me, the interesting part of this is, we're not in the healthcare space. That's not our DNA. But when we started listening to the needs that you have and where we could look at, we said, you know what? We have the ability to manufacture, and we can use our additive manufacturing capabilities to come up with, here's some prototypes that we could quickly get into your hands. We turned it around in really a couple of days. You were able to take it, get it into the hands of users, and give instantaneous feedback that then we were able to go and make the modifications. And to me, I think this pandemic really showed two things, is that one, even if you're non-traditional type of partners and manufacturers, suppliers and stuff, if you have a focus and that power of focus around solving customer problems, you can leverage your capabilities and really do amazing things. And I think that was really a starting point from, invent innovation by necessity to now what we're looking at as much broader areas of collaboration that honestly, if we didn't have this crisis, might not have come about.
Very interesting insights, David and Michael. And David and Michael, I'd really like you to elaborate a little bit more, if you don't mind. And David, you mentioned that what you saw in New York, what you saw in Italy, really made the situation dire and urgent. And I'm curious to find out, how did the urgency of that situation on the ground help drive that acceleration of innovation to meet these huge challenges that you and Michael just articulated?
Well, we've plagiarized and coined a phrase that Michael just used, the power of focus. And it truly underscores what is achievable when you marry purpose, urgency, and intentionality. There is obviously a natural adrenaline surge associated with the community coming together in a selfless manner at a time of crisis. And all of these ingredients are ironically, in my mind, liberating when it comes to innovation. The traditional guardrails, whether those are real or self-imposed, are eliminated. And Michael will attest to the fact, as will many members of his team with whom we were associated at the time and still are, there was almost an Apollo 13 reaction. What are the problems to be solved? What is the priority of need, the hierarchy of need? What resources do we have on hand? And how might we collectively begin to rapidly prototype and iterate? As Michael said, all informed by user feedback, often within a 24-hour cycle time. And it was egoless, as Michael will attest. We had a brain surgeon on call who would literally act as courier and information conduit when it came to all of the rapid iterating around what was being designed in order to gather the insights from user feedback. So when you invite non-traditional players to enter into the fray, and when combined with fortunately some promising open source designs and concepts, one on one proved to amount to far more than two.
I think what this showed is that we have tremendous opportunities to make an impact. And I think, after we went through and started looking at, okay, are we solving the immediate crisis? What laid ahead is even just is as exciting, if you will. David mentioned telemedicine and the remote monitoring. And one of the things that we started brainstorming on, because it was really fascinating from our point of view, after we got through and started thinking about the critical healthcare workers and protecting the front line, we started just talking about, hey, what's after that? Because we have to get the country going, we have to get everybody, back into some sort of normalcy, even though the new normal will be with us probably forever. But how do we make sure that people that are producing the foods and goods and the groceries in our food supply, how are they going back to work safely? How are we enabling everybody else downstream that's really part of our whole economy to go back to work safely? And it was really another interesting collaboration is that, UH was working on different playbooks for different segments, and we were looking at, we're a manufacturing company, so we're thinking about how do we get our people, back to work. And it was like, look, we could start blending some of the knowledge, more of the knowledge that UH has in terms of protocols and epidemiology and working with employee safety, and combine that with what we did on the physical sense to now bring in digital technologies. And how can we go and help people feel safe at work, protecting them physically, but also emotionally, letting them know, are people in physical distance or proximity of each other? Is there, are they wearing and are they being compliant with PPE? If somebody in a setting with close proximity is diagnosed with COVID, is there a way to automatically go and trace and understand what happened? And we started thinking about bringing digital technology
into the physical PPE realm. And it's leading to a whole new set of potential solutions that we can bring out to keep employees, to keep workers, and everyone safe while we're going through this pandemic.
Thank you, Michael. So I'd like to ask the panel let's think about the months ahead and where do we go from here? I know there's still a lot of uncertainty. We know the pandemic will continue to evolve in ways that we just can't predict. So Allan, I'm curious, what do you see being the major trends in infrastructure and safety as hospitals continue to respond to the evolving pandemic?
We have several projects that are, large scale replacement hospital type projects that are on the boards right now. And in most of them, we have to balance the cost versus the need. It's difficult because most projects have a budget that they got to work to that's developed off of a previous model, which might not be up to date. So we're looking at ICU adaptable rooms and whether or not they're going to add head walls and things that might be needed to handle this type of surge in the future. Being able to quickly change patient rooms from the standard patient room to a negative pressure room remotely by BMS, and having a robust wireless network infrastructure system in place to be able to exchange information both from the patient side and the doctor side, but also on the facility side. Like I said, we're seeing multiple wireless networks within the facilities to be able to do that securely because of the patient confidentiality requirements. Surge emergency departments, designing them, because there's a lot of emergency departments currently on the boards, but they're being designed with the ability to add temporary facilities and having all their utilities sitting there ready for plug and play. So electrical panels and mechanical components, heating and cooling components, so that they were able to quickly mobilize and set them up so that they can handle the surge of patients. And then, if you look at the healthcare providers in a city versus their network, most of the suburbs have medical office buildings that are kind of feeder places for the sickest patients coming to the healthcare facility in the cities. But using those suburban areas with pop-up testing facilities, making sure that they have appropriate utilities available out there so that they can quickly mobilize and set up testing facilities. We're seeing a lot of that happening now, and then not necessarily on the healthcare side, but we can certainly see that the large-scale convention center type spaces have the ability to provide, to quickly change over and provide support for an event like this. I don't know that they'll all be designed with water in the floor and utilities all in trenches in the floor so that you can quickly set up 1,000 rooms right away. But they're certainly going to have the ability to do that with enough componentry in there so that they can handle the surge of patients. And then, like we talked about earlier, the equipment in the facilities is becoming smarter and smarter, and the ability to catch things before they happen and correct things or make adjustments remotely from an engineering standpoint is becoming a bigger component in all of the facilities that we design right now.
So David, that brings up some good points that Allan mentioned. I mean, how does a hospital move forward when it's a constantly moving target? I'm interested to learn from you how UH is handling this as you move forward.
For our group, from an innovation and investment perspective, we're beginning to think about a de-emphasis on the built environment, and not so much from the perspective of could we, do we need to continue to acknowledge that there needs to be capacity for surge capacity from a pandemic response perspective, but how do we continue to facilitate and enable a better patient and provider experience, acknowledging that there will be less of a bricks and mortar footprint. So as far as ventures is concerned, we're exploring the trend of less physical infrastructure moving forward. Safety, on the other hand, is also partly in our bailiwick. And what I mean by that is our focus on building or sourcing tools, technologies that augment the like of triage or clinical decision support or image interpretation diagnosis, all with the aim of error reduction and improved outcomes. So a distinctly safety play. There are very few clinical domains in healthcare where AI can't be considered as an augmentation to the delivery of healthcare. Some further along in their evolution than others. For example, radiology and dermatology come to mind as areas in our system that are partnering with or conducting proof of concepts with technologies powered by AI, and there's certainly others. You know, there's this sort of backdrop drumbeat of, you know, will the robots take my job? The answer is that yes, and they should. The robots will take the job of those who can't use the robots. So there has to be this continual march towards adaptability and receptivity when it comes to technology. And of course, you know, as we previously mentioned, a remote, digital, and continual surveillance of patients in their homes reflects another critical safety imperative for us. Remember, we have an antithetical business model. We do better if you don't come and see us.
So Michael, I'm curious, just listening to Allan and David, this is moving quickly, both from an infrastructure perspective, the points that Allan made, and then also from a digital perspective, from David's point of view. So Michael, what is Eaton's role moving forward in this environment? How do we consult with our clients, and how do we help them move forward?
You know what, Justin, one of the things that it's really, this whole crisis has really taught us is that if you take what is a traditional kind of either product development schedule or a new invention and stuff, you had to tremendously compress the time frame. And I think if there's really, you know, a few things that we need to take out of it going forward is that the companies that are going to be successful are going to have to be ultra focused on collaboration. There's nobody that can do it on their own, and you really have to be able to collaborate well. And what I mean with that, what I mean by that is, I think about it in terms of a triangle, if you will. We have to be able to understand our customers and really understand their needs, their pain points, and their problems that they're trying to solve. And then make sure that any technology that we're building, any solutions, are going to address those customer problems. And then the second part of that triangle is simplicity. What we found is that we no longer had time to explain large, technically complex type of problems, but we have to be able to deploy things and implement them with simplicity to go and solve those needs. And then the third leg of that triangle is scalability. It's good if you could do it once, but you have to be able to do it at scale, thousands of times or hundreds of thousands of times, to really go and make an impact. And I think about that if I look at, you know, the challenges that Allan has in kind of building infrastructure, right? How do we understand the challenges that he goes through as he's trying to build that infrastructure, make sure that the products that we produce are simple to enable so that he can go and build that infrastructure and then do it at scale. And similarly, coming back to, you know, the challenges that David had, right? How do we go and make sure that we're taking care of the physical safety as well as the mental safety of patients and healthcare workers, making sure that any solutions that get deployed are addressing those needs, but we're able to do it in a simple way without having to rework many different processes. And then you can go and scale it at large to a number of people in many different environments. And that's what I see really ahead, is being able to work in those dimensions and really collaborate well with your customers to make it happen.
I think that's a great segue, Michael, into our final question. And if you don't mind, I'd like to dive a little deeper into that. And so how can our hospitals and healthcare providers build on these innovative changes that they made during the pandemic to make their environment safer, more resilient, and more sustainable moving forward?
Well, I'll start out and really throw a few ideas out there. But really making sure that, providers, that the solutions that you have are plug and play, and that you're moving towards more digital type of technologies. The ability to be able to understand how they're going to evolve and adapt over the course of time, be able to go and monitor them and do adaptations and changes as environment changes is really going to be critical. And we shouldn't be afraid of new technologies, but just understand that it's going to be a vital part of us making progress going forward. Integrating that in with existing infrastructure is only going to benefit everyone.
So Allan, I'm interested to learn how you're going to guide your clients moving forward.
There are several I guess you could call them buzzwords, but things that we talk about on every project. Resiliency is top and first and foremost on projects. That's looking at the critical needs of the facilities and making sure that we're designing them appropriately for things like a hurricane coming, or a snowstorm, or a loss of utilities, and what we would do for that. It's also, if in fact, because equipment does fail on occasion, that we have potentially have the N+1 design within that infrastructure to be able to adapt quickly and keep the systems online, because you cannot go down. The analogy that somebody made to me, it's like we have to design something as if it's a race car going 100 miles an hour when we change the tire on the fly. And that's usually what has to happen. Is it's pretty involved in making sure that you think of all the what if scenarios and design things that way. The second buzzword is sustainability. We're trying to design facilities now that are the most efficient ever, but still maintaining the guidelines, the DPH, FGI guidelines for those facilities. And things like POE and LED lighting and all the different components that are pushing the electrical usage down in the facilities. The cooling side of things, is becoming more efficient. So we're trying to push things down from a energy usage standpoint, but still provide the same level of service for the facilities. And then, the other thing that we talked about is the ability to, from a wireless standpoint, to be able to monitor and check things remotely and be able to operate facilities remotely. Those are the kind of the major things that are going into the future, with the eye towards the current situation, and making sure that there is sufficient mechanisms put in place to be able to bring things online, whether it's a temporary facility outside the facility, or whatever might come up as part of the need for the surge that might be happening.
So David, do you have any final thoughts, or should I say advice for hospital systems like yours as they move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my response is going to be a little bit more philosophical than tactical, Justin. The current pace of innovation is invigorating, but it's just not sustainable. But what should be is the purposeful focus. In my mind, healthcare needs to be receptive and open to solutions to well-known problems, well-documented problems that might already have been solved in other industries. And we need to be open. We need to have open viewfinders, if you will, when it comes to innovation. We need to be receptive to embracing novel opportunities that have surfaced in the midst of the pandemic response, but weren't necessarily spawned within our industry. And there's nothing wrong with failing, so long as you don't fail as a result of not overturning every stone, as a result of industry myopia, which for so long, Justin, has been an inhibitor for our industry. I think on a go-forward basis, the power of collaboration needs to be the sustainable, scalable subplot to innovation for the healthcare industry.
David, I want to add on to something that you said, because it just it really struck me, and I think this is really a go forward kind of path for everyone. And
I see this all the time. Everybody believes that their own situation, their own industry, own market segment is totally unique. But if you really take a broader perspective and look at solutions that have come up in other industries, you could start seeing applicability into yours. And all of a sudden, these daunting challenges, these daunting tasks start becoming a little bit more solvable. And I think that perspective you gave is really a breath of fresh air and something that we should all really look towards if we really want to make sustainable progress.
Well, thank you, Michael, for those final insights and thoughts. And I wanted to thank all our panelists again for taking the time to talk through this important topic. You've given our viewers plenty to think about, and I'd expect as the pandemic continues to evolve, there will be plenty of other opportunities to accelerate innovation. If you'd like to learn more about how Eaton is helping to support innovation efforts across the healthcare industry, please visit our website. And if you can, please stick around for our survey, which will appear after this broadcast. And finally, I wanted to thank all of you for watching. We look forward to sharing more insights with you on our next Current Thinking broadcast.